All right, so today we're diving into one of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power.
Okay.
It's all about, kind of forging your own path to power.
Right.
We're talking about Law 41, avoid stepping into a great man's shoes.
Yeah, it's funny,
Mm-hmm.
we're almost wired to compare, especially when someone new takes over
Oh, totally.
for someone who is, really powerful before.
Yeah.
It's like that instant measuring stick.
Yeah, the curse of the legacy, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're always going to be judged against the person
Like
who came before you,
exactly.
no matter what you do.
Yeah, and Green argues that that creates kind of a pressure cooker
Oh, yeah.
where, every decision is scrutinized, every mistake is magnified.
It's almost like you're set up for failure.
Yeah, the expectations can be crushing.
Yeah.
And so to really achieve power and build your own legacy,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just try to fill those shoes.
Okay.
You have to kind of create your own space.
So how do you do that? How do you escape the shadow of a great man and forge your own path?
Green's advice is surprisingly simple and incredibly powerful.
Okay.
Reinvent, don't imitate.
So it's not about being a carbon copy of somebody.
Right.
It's about bringing your own unique skills and perspective.
Exactly. And that applies whether you're a CEO
Okay.
taking over a company, whether you're a politician stepping into office, whether you're an artist.
I was going to say, yeah, like an artist coming after someone who's,
Absolutely.
done great things.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a new CEO taking over for, some legendary founder.
Right.
How do you even begin to step out of that shadow?
Well, first you have to acknowledge the legacy,
Yeah.
but don't dwell on it.
Okay.
What happens when you try to step into a great man's shoes?
Mm-hmm.
You only remind people of his greatness.
Okay.
So it's about, finding that balance between honoring what came before
Yeah.
and signaling that you're bringing something new to the table.
So it's not erasing the past, but kind of building on top of it in your own way.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And one of the best examples of this is Alexander the Great.
Okay.
Think about it. He inherited a powerful kingdom from his father, Philip II of Macedon.
So big shoes to fill.
Huge shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Philip had already conquered most of Greece. He was already a legendary figure.
And so did he just try to copy his dad?
He could have, and many expected him to.
Yeah.
But Alexander was savvy. He recognized that to truly secure his power
Mm-hmm.
and build his own legacy, he needed to do something bold, something unexpected.
Okay.
So he turned east and set his sights on the Persian Empire.
The Persian Empire.
The
Wow.
Persian Empire, which at that time was vast and powerful.
Yeah. I mean, and they defeated the Greeks multiple times.
Exactly. It seemed like a fool's errand.
Right.
But that's precisely why it was so brilliant.
Okay.
By targeting Persia,
Yeah.
Alexander did two things.
Okay.
He unified the Greeks under his leadership against a common enemy,
Smart.
and he shifted the narrative away from his father's legacy.
Okay.
He wasn't just trying to maintain his father's empire. He was building his own.
That's so clever.
It really was.
By going in this unexpected direction, he actually strengthened his own position
Right.
and created a new playing field.
Exactly. He understood that power isn't just about holding on to what you inherit.
Mm-hmm.
It's about expanding, innovating,
Yeah.
and creating something new.
Okay.
He was a master of redefining the game.
Okay. So Alexander the Great, that's a pretty epic example.
It is.
What about something a little more relatable?
Sure.
How does this reinvent, don't imitate idea play out in business?
One of the most striking examples is Tim Cook taking over Apple after Steve Jobs.
Oh, yeah. Talk about pressure.
I mean, talk about an impossible act to follow.
Right.
Jobs was a visionary. He was a showman. He was a larger-than-life personality.
When Cook took over, I remember people were like, is Apple going to lose its edge?
Oh, absolutely.
Without Jobs there.
There was so much skepticism when Cook took the helm.
People thought he was just going to be Steve Jobs 2.0.
Exactly, and that's the trap Greene warns about.
Yeah.
Trying to imitate a predecessor only highlights their greatness
Right.
and makes your own shortcomings more apparent.
Yeah.
But Cook didn't fall into that trap.
Okay.
He recognized that he couldn't be Steve Jobs, and he didn't try to be.
Right. So what did he do?
He focused on his own strengths.
Okay, so what were his strengths? How did he differentiate himself?
Well, Cook came from a very different background than Jobs.
Yeah.
Jobs was the creative genius, the product visionary.
Right.
Cook, on the other hand, was a master of operations, logistics, supply chain management.
So instead of being like the ideas guy, he was making sure that they could actually execute
Exactly.
on a global scale.
Yeah, and it played to his strengths beautifully.
Okay.
He streamlined Apple's supply chain, making it one of the most efficient in the world.
Wow.
He also focused on building strong relationships with suppliers,
Okay.
ensuring ethical sourcing and sustainable practices.
So he was bringing a whole new set of values to the table, which helped to redefine what leadership meant.
Exactly. And it worked under Cook's leadership. Apple's revenue and profits soared.
Wow.
He didn't just maintain Apple's success,
Right.
he took it to new heights.
By being himself.
By being himself, not by trying to be Steve Jobs.
That's powerful.
It is.
So you don't have to be the charismatic visionary
Right.
to be a really successful leader.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the work behind the scenes is just as important.
Absolutely. And it all goes back to that core idea.
Yeah.
Reinvent, don't imitate.
Okay.
Find your own strengths, your own style, and build on the legacy in your own way.
I love it. This is so fascinating.
It is.
I'm curious, though, what happens when a successor tries too hard to cling to the past?
Well, in some cases, it can lead to disaster.
Okay.
And for that, we can look to the rather unfortunate example of Louis XVI of France.
Oh, Louis XVI.
Yeah.
He's the one who lost his head in the French Revolution, right?
That's him. And while his downfall was a complex historical event with many contributing factors,
Right.
Greene argues that Louis VI's inability to adapt to changing times, his insistence on clinging to outdated traditions
Okay.
played a significant role.
So he was trying to step into some pretty big shoes as well.
He was, but in this case, it was the shoes of his grandfather, Louis IV,
Okay.
the legendary Sun King.
Right, Louis XIV, extravagance, lavish court at Versailles,
Exactly.
the symbol of a bygone era.
And Louis VI seemed determined to emulate him.
Oh, but times had changed.
France was facing an economic crisis, social unrest,
Yeah.
a growing sense of dissatisfaction with the monarchy.
People wanted change.
People wanted change. They wanted reform. They
Yeah.
wanted a more representative government. And Louis XVI just wasn't getting the memo.
He wasn't listening.
He wasn't. Instead of adapting to these changing winds,
Mm.
he doubled down on the old ways.
Oh, wow.
He surrounded himself with courtiers who reinforced his worldview.
Okay.
And he ignored the growing calls for reform.
So he's clinging to the past.
He was clinging to the past even as the ground was shifting beneath his feet.
Yeah, and it didn't end well.
It didn't end well.
Ugh.
It ultimately proved fatal.
Wow.
His inability to break free from the legacy of his grandfather, to adapt to the demands of a new era, contributed to his downfall and the collapse of the French monarchy.
That is a cautionary tale.
It is a cautionary tale.
Like clinging to the past.
Right, trying to fit into shoes that no longer fit.
Yeah.
It shows that even in positions of immense power, the inability to adapt, to reinvent, to forge your own path
Rare.
can lead to disastrous consequences.
All right, so we've talked about the importance of reinvention,
Right.
the power of redefining the game,
Yeah,
the dangers of clinging to the past,
absolutely.
but we've only just scratched the surface of Law 41.
Indeed, there's so much more to explore, including some practical strategies for applying this law
Okay.
in your own life.
Well, I am definitely ready to dig deeper.
Let's do it.
We'll continue the conversation in our next episode.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We're talking about Law 41, avoid stepping into a great man's shoes.
Right, we've seen some pretty dramatic examples.
We have Alexander the Great, Louis XVI.
Yeah,
Really kind of shows the stakes.
it does.
But I'm wondering, how do we apply this in our own lives?
Yeah.
It feels a bit daunting, like
Yeah,
something only emperors and CEOs have to worry about.
that's where Greene's brilliance comes in.
Okay.
He doesn't just lay out these laws for,
Yeah.
some elite few.
Okay.
He gives us tools to actually use them no matter what our goals are.
Okay, so what are some of those tools? How do we take reinvent, don't imitate, and actually put it into practice?
Well, he offers a few concrete strategies.
Okay.
First, he talks about the importance of differentiation.
Okay.
It's not enough to just be competent in a role
Right.
previously held by someone great.
Mm-hmm.
You have to bring something new to the table, something that sets you apart.
So does that mean I have to invent like some new groundbreaking thing?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It can be much subtler than that.
Okay.
It's about identifying your unique strengths
Yeah.
and finding ways to leverage them
Okay.
in your work.
This reminds me of you see this all the time in entertainment.
Yeah.
Actors who play these iconic roles like James Bond,
Sure.
like Hamlet.
Right.
Each one brings their own.
Right. Their own spin on it.
Yeah, they're building on a legacy,
Yeah.
but they're not just trying to replicate.
They're adding their own flavor, their own personality.
Oh, right.
And that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, like they're acknowledging the tradition.
Yeah.
But they're also like pushing it forward, evolving it.
That's a great way to put it. And that evolution is crucial.
Yeah.
Because if they just try to copy their predecessors exactly, they'd just come across as stale, unoriginal.
Yeah, like a bad karaoke performance.
Exactly.
You might hit the notes,
right,
but you're missing the soul.
You're missing the soul. And so Greene also emphasizes, the importance of understanding your own strengths and weaknesses.
Oh, okay.
He argues that you shouldn't try to be good at everything.
Right.
Instead, focus on what you're truly exceptional at.
So you're not a jack of all trades. You're a master of your specific craft.
Exactly. And by doing that, you're automatically differentiating yourself.
Yeah.
You're not trying to be someone else.
Yeah.
You're becoming the best version of yourself.
Okay, so that makes sense. But what if you're in a situation where the comparisons are inevitable?
Yeah.
Like how do you actually shift the narrative so people stop judging you against this other person?
That's where the whole concept of redefining the game comes in.
You mentioned that before. What does that mean?
It means that you don't accept the existing framework.
Okay.
The one where you're constantly being measured against someone else.
Yeah.
You change the rules of engagement.
Okay.
You introduce new metrics, new goals, new ways of evaluating success.
So it's like you're saying, okay, those old standards, they don't apply to me. Yeah. I'm playing by a different set of rules.
You're playing by your own rules now.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you're taking control of the narrative. You're no longer letting others define what success looks like for you.
Right.
You're setting your own terms.
I love that. This is feeling a lot less daunting and a lot more empowering.
It should. Yeah. Remember, this law is all about taking ownership of your own path to power. And sometimes that means being bold enough to say, hey, I'm doing things differently.
What if people see you as like arrogant or disrespectful?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
There's a fine line between confidently charting your own course and, completely dismissing what came before you.
Like you have to acknowledge the foundation without letting it be your prison.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And this is where another of Greene's strategies comes in. Acknowledge the past, but don't dwell on it.
So how do you strike that balance? How do you show respect for your predecessor without constantly comparing yourself?
It's about finding ways to honor the past while simultaneously signaling that you're moving in a new direction.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's not about avoiding someone else's shadow.
Right.
It's about creating your own light.
Exactly. And that light can be your unique set of skills, your vision, your values, your way of approaching problems.
So you're saying, hey, world, I'm not here to be a copycat. I'm bringing something new.
Exactly.
And different.
And that takes courage.
Okay.
And that's why Greene emphasizes the importance of boldness. He writes, timidity will only make the comparisons to your predecessor more glaring. To truly establish your own identity, you need to be willing to take risks, make bold decisions that set you apart.
What does boldness look like when you're not leading a cavalry charge or giving a TED Talk?
Right. Boldness doesn't have to be.
Okay.
About these grand sweeping gestures.
Okay.
It can be as simple as, speaking up with a new idea in a meeting.
Okay.
Challenging a long-held assumption in your field. Taking on a project that pushes you outside of your comfort zone.
So it's those small acts of courage.
Yeah.
Where you kind of choose to step forward instead of hanging back.
It's about pushing yourself to be a little bit more daring.
Okay.
A little bit more unconventional.
So it's not about being reckless. It's about finding that sweet spot.
That sweet spot between honoring the past and embracing the future.
Where the magic happens.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, I want to talk about an example that I think really embodies this.
Sure.
And it's Netflix.
Netflix.
Everyone loves Netflix.
Yeah.
But when they started out, they were a DVD by mail service.
They were.
Right. They were competing with Blockbuster.
Yeah, the giant.
Blockbuster was everywhere.
It seemed like they'd be around forever.
They had tons of movies.
And that's the danger Greene warns about.
Yeah.
Becoming complacent, clinging to a model that's no longer relevant.
Right.
Blockbuster made that fatal mistake of underestimating the power of disruption.
Yeah. They didn't see it coming.
They thought people would always prefer the experience of going to a store,
Yeah.
browsing the shelves.
Right.
But Netflix saw the future.
They recognized that people wanted
Ah.
convenience and choice and instant access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they weren't afraid to make a bold move.
Okay.
They transitioned from DVDs to streaming.
Which seemed risky at the time?
It did at the time.
Yeah.
But it was a calculated risk.
Okay.
One that was based on a deep understanding
Yeah.
of the changing landscape of entertainment.
And it paid off.
It did.
In a big way.
It completely revolutionized how we consume movies and TV shows.
Okay, so they embraced change. They weren't afraid to disrupt. They didn't try to become a better blockbuster.
They didn't.
They created something new.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Okay, I want to talk about the flip side of that.
Okay.
What about when change is necessary, but it's more about adapting to existing structures?
Yeah.
Not completely disrupting.
Sure.
How do you balance respect for tradition with the need to modernize or evolve?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that concept of, finding that sweet spot between honoring the past and embracing the future.
Yeah, okay.
For a really fascinating example of this, we can look to Theodore Roosevelt.
Teddy.
Teddy.
Always a good time.
Always a good time.
What does a turn-of-the-century president have to do with modern-day leadership?
Well, think about the context.
Okay.
Roosevelt becomes president after the assassination of William McKinley.
Okay.
Who was seen as a fairly cautious traditional leader.
Right. He was all about stability and maintaining the status quo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Roosevelt could have easily followed that path.
Right.
Especially given the circumstances of his ascension to the presidency.
Yeah.
But he chose a different route.
Teddy was not known for being timid.
He was not. Roosevelt was a force of nature.
Yeah.
Bold, energetic.
Yeah.
Deeply committed to progressive ideals.
Right.
He understood that America was at a crossroads.
Okay.
And he wasn't afraid to shake things up.
So he was walking that tightrope
Yeah.
of respecting the past, but also pushing for change.
He was.
Yeah.
Precisely. He didn't completely abandon McKinley's legacy.
Okay.
But he didn't let it define his presidency either.
Right.
He built upon it, he expanded upon it, and ultimately he made it his own.
How did he do that?
Well, for one, he challenged the power of big business.
Oh, wow.
Something that was almost unheard of at the time.
Okay.
He believed that corporations had too much influence over the government.
Okay.
And that they were exploiting workers and consumers. So he went after monopolies. He strengthened labor laws.
Okay.
He pushed for greater regulation of industry.
That was a pretty radical stance back then.
It was.
Yeah.
And it earned him the nickname Trust Buster.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Which he wore with pride.
Yeah, that's awesome. He also recognized the importance of conservation.
They did.
And environmental protection.
Absolutely.
Which was just starting to kind of...
Yeah, it was a
become a thing.
Budding concern.
So he was kind of a visionary.
He was. He saw the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And he really laid the groundwork for a lot of the policies that we have today.
It's amazing how much he was able to accomplish.
I know, it's incredible.
In the time that he was president.
Yeah.
It goes back to Law 41.
It does.
He wasn't trying to be McKinley 2.0.
Right.
He brought his own energy and ideas and his own vision.
And in doing so, he left an indelible mark on American history.
So inspiring. Okay, but how do we take these big historical examples and translate them into concrete action?
That's a great question.
It's a bold move for someone who's not running a country.
Right. That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore in our next segment.
Okay.
We'll delve into some practical strategies for applying Law 41.
I like it. Getting tactical.
Getting tactical.
I'm ready. Okay, so we've explored Law 41 through emperors and CEOs and presidents.
We have.
Now, how do we bring it down to earth? Something we can actually use in our daily lives.
Well, remember, the core idea is, create your own space, your own path.
Reinvent, don't imitate.
Exactly.
How do we actually do that?
Right.
It feels like we've been looking at these massive figures and thinking, well, that's great, but I'm just me.
That's where Greene gets surprisingly tactical.
Okay.
He breaks it down into a few key actions.
Okay.
First, differentiate.
Okay.
What makes you distinct in the role you're in or the role you want? This isn't about inventing something wholly new, but highlighting what you bring that's different.
So if I'm taking over a project from a colleague who had a very specific way of doing things, I shouldn't just try to mimic their style.
Think about what you excel at.
Okay.
Maybe you're great at organization. Maybe you have a knack for building consensus.
Okay.
Maybe you're a whiz with the data analysis.
Right.
Lean into those strengths.
Okay.
That's how you start to shift the narrative from replacement to someone who brings something new.
Okay, but what if I'm in a field where it feels like everything's already been done?
Right.
How do you create something new when you're surrounded by people who are already doing amazing things?
Yeah, that's where Greene's concept of redefining the game comes in.
Okay.
He's not saying ignore what came before you.
Right.
Instead, he's urging you to shift the perspective to create a new set of rules,
Okay.
a new way of judging success.
Could you give me an example? I'm still kind of stuck on the abstract.
Imagine you're a young artist
Okay.
trying to break into a very traditional art scene
Mm-hmm.
instead
Yeah.
of trying to fit into the existing galleries and expectations.
Right.
What if you create your own exhibition space?
Okay.
What if you leverage social media in a completely new way to showcase your work
Right.
and build a following?
Okay.
You're not rejecting the art world,
Right.
but you're creating your own space within it.
I love that. So it's not about rebelling against the system. It's about creating your own system
See,
in the existing one.
And that act of creation,
Yeah.
that's where the power lies.
Okay.
It's about taking ownership, not just following a predetermined path.
Okay, so we've got differentiate, we've got redefine.
Right.
What else?
Acknowledge the past,
Okay.
but don't dwell in it.
Right.
Respect the work that came before you learned from it,
Mm-hmm.
but don't let it define you.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to say, I'm building on this legacy, but I'm taking it in a new direction.
So it's like standing on the shoulders of giants?
Yeah. But instead of just admiring the view you're reaching
Exactly.
for something even higher.
That's a great analogy.
And the final piece of advice.
Maybe the most important one.
Okay.
Be bold.
Okay, boldness keeps coming up.
It does.
Why is it so crucial in this context?
Because boldness signals confidence.
That-
Shows you're not afraid to break from the mold.
Mhm.
It tells the world, I'm not here to play it safe. I'm here to make a difference.
Okay, but what's a bold move for someone who's not,
Yeah.
leading a TED Talk?
It can be anything that pushes you outside your comfort zone.
Okay.
It could be speaking up in a meeting when you usually stay silent.
Okay.
It could be taking on a challenging project that no one else wants.
Mhm.
It could be starting that side hustle you've been dreaming about.
So those small steps that add up to big changes,
Exactly.
both in how you see yourself.
And how others perceive you.
Yeah. This has been so fantastic.
It has.
We've covered history and business and art and even personal growth. It's been a privilege to delve into this with you.
Well, thank you.
Remember, the most powerful legacy you can build is the one that reflects your own unique strengths and vision.
Absolutely. So to our listener out there, I hope you're feeling inspired
I hope so too.
to create your own space, redefine the game, and be bold
Yes.
in pursuit of your goals.
Absolutely.
Remember, you're not here to fill someone else's shoes.
You're here to create your own path.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Keep diving deep.
and keep diving deep.